All right, we want to welcome you into episode number 7, lucky number 7 of the Maine Rundown podcast. As always, I'm Zach Durenko alongside Jeff Christianberry. We took a little week hiatus, but now we're back. Jeff, you're back. So before we get into anything, and we have, let me tell you, a lot to get into this week. Talk about your trip. You went all across Europe. You hit a bunch of countries. You went a bunch of places. You saw a lot of things. Some good weather, some bad weather. Saw some good soccer games. Had some bad soccer games. Tell me a little bit about your trip and what you enjoyed the most. And yeah.
Yeah, so it was a whirlwind, 10 days or 9 days, I guess. I went to England and then Germany and then Switzerland and then Ireland. My original idea was to go to see a Liverpool match before, as they're in the title race. Jurgen Klopp's leaving with Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, guys like that. You don't know how long they're going to be there for. I'd seen a Liverpool game before. I saw a few friendlies here in Boston. But then I also went to the Champions League final a couple years ago in Paris when they lost to Real Madrid. So, but I'd never been to Anfield for a game. I'd been there for a tour about 14 years ago. Anyway, so I bit the bullet, spent a lot of money to buy a ticket. And of course, they went and lost 1-0 to Crystal Palace, Crystal Palace is awful. Basically killed their title chances, and they didn't score a goal. So 2 games I've been to in person that mattered, and they've lost 1-0 in both of them. So now the experience was great. The stadium was amazing. I sat right in the COP, the section about 12 rows from the field. Couldn't be better experience that way. The day before that, I went to Southampton, who now play in the championship. Those tickets I was able to get for cheap. And they're in a title. They're in not a title race, but they're a race for automatic promotion. They were up 2-0. They blew the lead, and then they actually scored like in the 99th minute on a corner kick right at the end to win the match. So that was pretty cool. I'm not a huge Southampton fan. Chris Sedanka, a huge Southampton fan who we had on in our last episode.
Yeah.
So I got him a few things from the store. But and then after England, I went over to Germany, stayed with a former dorm student and his family because I'd never been to Germany. Up in the Hamburg area, which is very nice. And then I went to Switzerland. The only reason I went to Switzerland or had an idea is because of TikTok and Instagram. I've seen all these, videos that popped up on my For You and all that about some of that. Now, the only thing about Switzerland, it was great, but the weather wasn't amazing. April was very touch and go there up in the Alps. It was snowing and zero, so it was like zero visibility. So I'll definitely have to go back to that. And then I finished off in Ireland to go to Dublin and then out west to the Cliffs of Moher and some other ones. So whirlwind trip. I had to get 3 different types of currency, 3 different adapters for my chargers, but I didn't lose anything. So it was a great trip. I'll definitely do that again. It's crazy doing about 48 hours in each country, but you get to see a lot. So, but glad to be back. Now, it was tough though watching sports because 5 or 6 hours ahead over there. I basically had to skip pretty much everything. Thankfully, like the Bruins and Celtics hadn't started in the playoffs, so and all the soccer was on at prime time, so I wasn't able to miss too much. But it could be, I can see how it'd be rough being like an NFL fan over there, not being able to watch a Sunday night game unless you want to stay up all night. So
Yeah.
And I heard you went to a Rangers game, something over the break.
I did, yeah. So because I'm in Connecticut, it seemed like it was like almost like meant to be that my dad was going to drive down and see a Ranger game with me, and I was like, let's just go to game 1. Like, first off, I thought it's only going to get more expensive from here, and the
They're
Washington
probably only going to last one series anyway, right? So
I don't know about that, but I knew it was going to be a good game, and yeah, so bought tickets. MSG is a very interesting arena the way it's built. It's a great arena. I thought I thought for what I paid, I got good tickets for what it was not bad, but a lot of MSG, especially up high, is obstructed seating. You've got like the bridge, the MSG like Chase Bridge all around the top. And so once you get past a point, a part of your view is obstructed, whether you can't see the Jumbotron, whether you're missing a part of the ice on the side. It's not, and the tickets are cheaper, but it's not that much cheaper, especially for playoffs. So I had a great time, whether or not the Chase Bridge was right above me right here. I had a great time, great atmosphere. Matt Rempe with a huge goal sent the Garden going wild. But I got to say, TD Garden has been, and will always be louder. It's because MSG is so big, it just can't get that loud. And I remember I went to a game, round 1, game 1 game for Boston, which I would expect to be more amped up because it's the first game of the playoffs, and I couldn't hear for like 20 minutes of the pregame. I literally couldn't hear anything. It was so loud, and it's such a crazy atmosphere in there. So TD Garden will always be, in my opinion, a better playoff arena, but still had a great time, saw a great win, and my dad left happy as he's a Rangers fan. Although I regret putting on that Rangers jersey because now my dad has photographic evidence of me wearing a Rangers jersey, which I never thought was going to happen. But I had a great weekend, and obviously it seems like you enjoyed Europe. So, but now we're back, and we'll get right into it in our rundown topics. Why don't you take us off with your first one of the week?
Yeah, so this one is a little bit to do with the trip, but also local flavor. So this Saturday on the 27th, USL to Portland, which is the team that's coming to Portland that's going to play in the United Soccer League, I think League One, so like the third or fourth tier. That's finally happening after many years of talking about it. It's going to start in the 2025 season. This Saturday, they have their brand reveal. So there's an event at Thompson's Point in Portland where you can go put down your season ticket deposit, kind of reserve season tickets, and at 11 o'clock they're going to have this reveal the real name, the colors, the brand, the logo, all that kind of stuff. I'm really into it. So how does that matter to here? So going to these two matches over in Europe, and I've watched soccer for about almost 20 years now. I really got into it around 2005. I always watched Team USA, but club soccer. And then going to these places, right? I mean, it's just, and I've gone to many, many Patriots games. I'm a season ticket holder. I've been to a lot of Red Sox games, a lot of Celtics games, never Bruins game, never won. But anyway, going to these, you hear about the fandom over in England and Europe, and you wonder, you watch the games and then you turn your TV off and you go back to it. But when you're actually there, I think it's really fascinating. So I've said for a long time, the New England Revolution, I'm the kind of person where they've lost a fan. Like if they had a stadium in Boston that was accessible by train or a quicker car ride, I'd go 4 or 5 times a year. I'm not going to go to every game, but I've been to like 2 or 3 Revolution games ever. I'm not going to drive over 2 hours each way to sit in a half-empty football stadium to cheer for a team that plays on turf anyway. So for years I've said that, and as much as I've loved the Crafts, I think they've been an embarrassing owner of MLS. They just refuse to do it, and I know it's not all their fault. But trying to find all that land in Boston is not easy. And every couple of years, like it just happened like a month ago, you see them say, "Oh, look, this is what a stadium could look like near." I think it's Everett, kind of near where the casino is over there. And like, oh, everyone gets excited, and then it never happens. So I've never really been able to support a team that's local or close that I can go to a game soon. On USL team is going to be awesome. Like again, they're not playing in MLS, like not even close. Again, 3rd or 4th division of the USL. But it's going to be something to cheer for. So when I went to the Liverpool match, what's fascinating about that stadium, Liverpool is a pretty big city. It's like, I don't know, it's in the top 10 for sure in England, maybe 4th or 5th, 6th, whatever. The stadium itself is in the middle of a neighborhood, really. And so to get there, I took a cab with a couple people from Ireland, which is pretty cool. But you go through like neighborhoods. I go to and then you see this massive stadium that they've renovated over the last 10 years. Now it's over 60,000 or about 60,000 seats. And so anyway, the match is over. Disappointing loss, like 1-0, crushing, title hopes crushed. And there's really no great way to get back to the city center. So I'm just going to start walking. And it's like a 2-mile walk, but whatever. I had nothing else to do. I had like a 3 hours till my train ride.
Yep.
And so as I'm walking back, it was fascinating. And so I'm like walking with like fans that are from Liverpool. They've lived there their whole life. Liverpool is a pretty industrial area of the country. They famously don't really like the government very much. They feel like the government's kind of left them behind, especially the monarchy. They definitely don't like the monarchy there. But just walking back and seeing, you see these clubs on TV and you think Manchester United, Liverpool, Manchester City, Real Madrid, Barcelona. These are just like mega, almost like TV like stars. Then first of all, you see the players in real life. Like I was, again, 12 rows. I saw like Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, all these guys, Alisson, warming up, and you're like, wow, and play the game. And you're like, these are real dudes. And when they screw up, you're like, well, it makes sense. I mean, they're just real guys. Now they're very talented, well paid. So you see that, and then when you're leaving, and as I'm walking with this horde of people, they start breaking off onto their like little neighborhoods. Like we're not talking in a huge city. They're talking like onto the neighborhood, and this is what they have. This is their life. Like they don't have, and they pay all of the money that they have extra to go to these matches, and they go every week in, week out. They're not all like me who go once every 10 years. They're going week in, week out, pouring their heart and soul. A couple of the guys I was sitting next to, older dudes, probably in their 60s, just like screaming their lungs out. And they're not doing it to look cool. Like they're not, it's like the opposite of what you think of like when you think of a pink hat Red Sox fan, right? And every team has them. The pink hat fans who are there to take selfies, who are there to, enjoy the beer and enjoy, wearing their pink hat and don't really care about the game. This is the opposite of that. These guys could not care less about the style of being there. They just love their club more than anything else. So I was a little envious of that. Now, even though the game was terrible and they lost and probably lost the title because Arsenal, as we're taping this, just destroyed Chelsea today. It just made me feel like I'm really happy that the USL to Portland is coming. We're going to do a whole episode on them here coming up in the next couple of weeks, talking to some very important people to do with that project. But I just encourage people who, if you don't really know much about soccer, it's not just about the game. It's about, excuse me, I'm not choking up. I just literally had a getting over a cold. It's about, being there with your friends and being part of something really cool. So I'm really excited to see, first of all, they're going to update Fitzpatrick Stadium, which is going to be really awesome for all of us.
Very excited for
there. And everything else. So I don't know. It was just a really cool thing. It was a very great experience to see a huge club like that who's worth billions of dollars and have these fans who are just living locally and enjoying the club. So it definitely opens your eyes to what's out there in the world. And hopefully the USL team can have we have a little piece of that here in Portland, and they can have a great team starting next year. But again, check it out on this Saturday coming up. Watch out for the announcement for their brand and logo.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I think I think so far what they've done, they're doing a good job marketing it, which is great. I also think the event is going to be a pretty nice event. It's almost this like, I don't want to call it like it's hard to explain, but when I think of like what Mainers do on the weekends, like they go to breweries and they hang out at Thompson's Point. Like I unfortunately won't be able to make the event, which I'm really sad about because this is something I'd really enjoy. But they're hosting it at Brick South at Thompson's Point, which is an incredible venue. I went there for a wedding, really really nice. Hopefully the weather will be great. And then on top of that, it's just going to scream. I know it's going to scream Maine, and I think the brand reveal is going to be great. I'm really excited for this. I think it does, like you said, it does a lot for the Portland area because we have the Maine Mariners and the Maine Red Claws, and it's gone up and down. We've had the Pirates,
and the Sea Dogs,
but that's what we've had for so many years. We haven't had anything new. We've had brand changes, logo changes when the Red Claws went to the Celtics, but we haven't really ever had like something new that's Portland, almost all by itself. It's not affiliated with a team. It's not funded. It's just Portland, and I'm really excited about that. And I think it's going to be great. And I like the point you made is that at least to me, doesn't matter that it's not MLS. We don't need to have a top league, top team. I don't care if they win championships. I think it's just going to be really cool to have a nice stadium in Portland where we can watch another professional sport here in Maine, and it should be great.
It is, and soccer is it's a different sport than the other ones you talked about because it is all about the fandom, right? And people go to Sea Dogs games and Celtics games and Mariners games, but this is a different feel. It's very Portland, like you said. I'm not very bougie, but I know I'm going to be surrounded by the bouginess in Portland because that's really not my scene most of the time. But I'm excited to check it out, and again, once the games start, we'll see how it goes. And you've seen some of these teams in the smaller USL. I mean, they can eventually move up. They don't do like promotion relegation in the traditional way that you know it, but they sometimes get kind of promoted because they've been successful. And hopefully in the US Open Cup, you never know, sometimes you can actually play one of the bigger teams. So should be exciting. I'm ready to go. Me Portland, too. Whatever they're going to be, Portland FC or something.
I honestly have no idea what they're going for. I don't know if you know, but
I know someone who knows who's doing it, but they can't disclose what they're doing. Let's just say that. So I'm totally in the dark. But I'll be there Saturday morning. They say they're gonna have the Premier League games on in the morning at 10.
Nice.
The reveals at 11. So this should be a nice day.
You'll have to let me know. Like, send me a picture of what the.
I will. I'll do the little video on the Insta.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go to my first rundown topic. This one is just pretty much giving updates and giving some thoughts. As we talked a little bit about it in the last episode, it's been a couple of weeks, so we have an update. So the Maine Celtics and Maine Mariners both made the playoffs. One of them is already over. One of them is still going. The Maine Celtics lost in Game 3, which is only a 3-game series, so basically the equivalent of a Game 7 in the G League Finals. The OKC Blue. I don't know if you watched the series. Maine pretty much handled them in Game 1. Went to OKC. Lost in an iffy game in Game 2, comes back to Maine and blew it in the second
third quarter. It was the third quarter. It was like quarter.
Yeah, you're right. It was like in between the two of them, and it was like 22 or 24 straight points for OKC. At one point, they were down by 30, and then they just couldn't come back from that. It sucks they didn't win. I think it'd be really, really cool for the team. I do think, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I do think that Maine was good this year because they had a guy like Jordan Walsh who probably could have been in the NBA who was on the roster. They had some other guys like Drew Peterson step up. But I think it was great for them to make the G League Finals. You never think about, the Maine Mariners making the final. The Sea Dogs usually don't make the finals, and we haven't really had that in a while. So it was good, but just a tough loss. I watched the game, and I was like telling everybody about it around here at Quinnipiac. I was like, Maine Celtics G League Finals is on. Everyone's like, no one cares about the G League Finals. Like, I do. We do. But just not a great game. But overall, a good season, and I'm excited to see what Jordan Walsh might be able to do. And the Mariners are currently in the opening series against Adirondack. The Adirondack Thunder, who had a great year. But the interesting thing about the Maine Mariners, I think we talked about this before, is that this year the Mariners had a horrible start. Did not start the season well, lost a lot of games. The way that they play, I worked for the Mariners, so I remember this vividly. It's 3 days in a row on weekends. It's a tough schedule. It's not a fun schedule, and they just were losing all 3 for the first couple, like in the first couple weekends, first couple months. Excuse me. You saw that a lot of weekends where they just couldn't win games, and somehow, some way, Terrence Wallen and this team clinched a spot, and they had some great play from Alex Kyle, who's shouldn't be in the ECHL in my opinion, but is with that team, and they're currently tied with Adirondack. I believe 1-1. I think Game 3 is what is today, which is Tuesday. But we'll be putting this episode out later in the week. Should be a good series. It's a tough team with Adirondack, but this Maine team's got a lot of great talent, and they've had a lot of movement up and down from the AHL and the ECHL. A lot of guys getting called up. But the one thing I do want to point out is that, being with the team last year, I remember the roster. I remember a lot of the guys. And looking at this year, there's I think 4 or 5 players from last year. So for those of you who don't know, when the ECHL movement is players come and go very, very quickly. Players are traded all the time. So if you are enjoying the team now, enjoying these players, really, really soak up any of the games that they might play in the rest of the playoffs, because a lot of those guys may not be there. And I'm pretty sure, I know the way the ECHL playoffs work, it's a 2-3-2 system. So games 3, 4, 5 should be this weekend. I think this Friday,
They're
Saturday,
home,
Sunday.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's this Friday, Saturday, Sunday is 3, 4, 5. So should be a good series. Hopefully they win. Hopefully they keep it going. But just it's almost like miraculous. I was really watching them at the beginning of the year, and I was like, man, this team is just missing something. And somehow they figured out how to get to the playoffs again. And 5 seasons in, they've been successful. They've sold out a lot. So the Mariners kind of restarted after the Pirates left, and so it's been good to see. And again, hopefully they make that long run.
It is, yeah. I'll go back to the Celtics for a minute. It's disappointing because when you win Game 1 like they did, you're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna win. We're gonna win this.
Yeah,
we're gonna win.
They won. It was like a 20-point win, and I watched some of the game, and it just felt like they were just steps up on OKC. And I was like, all right, this is obviously because we have guys who maybe shouldn't be here, but let's go knock out Game 2 in OKC, and that's it. Let's win a G League final.
Yeah, and the fact that 2 of them at home, they had the third game at home, tough. But again, that's what the G League's all about, is getting that excitement. And I didn't go to any of the games. I did watch some of the highlights, but I have a friend, a coworker who's a season ticket holder, and she said it was just amazing. Like when we've said it before in the podcast, when that place is filled up, it could be a really intimidating atmosphere. So again, the hope that they continue this ride. And if the Celtics continue to be really good at the NBA level, which is no reason why they shouldn't be, you may get some of these guys that want to come down or will stay down because they want to get some playing time and they continue to be dominant. So, it's just tough sometimes during the season. They play in the winter. Sometimes there've been games where I've almost gone to, but it's been snowing, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, tough for those two local teams. Hopefully the Maine Mariners can pull it out. I mean, it's a long playoff run, just like in the regular NHL. So hopefully this is the start of something big for them.
Yeah.
All right, my second topic is kind of a generic one, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit because you are I'll call you a former high school athlete because you're not saying you're a former athlete, but you're a former high school athlete.
Yes. Yep.
So, we're in the spring season now, and over the next couple of weeks, we'll have Michael Hoffer in as for like a preview. Games have just started for tennis, baseball, lacrosse, everything. But I'm already looking forward towards the summer, and that's where this kind of question's about summer camps. So, a lot of kids are now pushed to continue to play 3 sports, which I think is a great thing instead of specializing one sport.
Mm-hmm.
But whether you're doing that 3-sport thing or whether you're going the AAU route or whatever, specializing, there's a lot of talk about rest time and when do you take time off to rest your body, not only just socially, be a kid and have a part-time job. And I just know here at our school, here at Thornton Academy, we run quite a few summer camps, basketball, and a lot of them for the youth. But what you also see now in the summertime, especially later in the summer, are some of these companies are running these clinics that are open to everybody. They don't really specialize in a sport, but they're specialized in just pliability and conditioning, everything else. And you'll see, at Thornton Academy, we run one with our local, Saco Bay. I don't want to Southern Maine Health. I'm not going to butcher the name. Through athletic trainers,
Yep.
They have dozens of kids, if not hundreds of kids from all different sports. And it's really open to anybody, not even just for our school. I want to ask you, like during the summertime, once the season starts, especially if you're a football player or something like that, it's a brutal sport, very physical, but you're kind of, I don't say you're pressured to play sports year round, but even on your break time, you're still supposed to be training. How did you find, doing summer camps, especially after you got out of youth camps, like when you got into the high school level, how much pressure did you have to play AAU off season? How did that help or hurt you?
Yeah, so I think before you even get into like how much it is, I think you first have to note, like you mentioned, it is completely different for different sports. That at its own level, certain sports require more training, more practices, more effort, more strategy than others. And then you go into like what different programs expect. So, for example, you have a Thornton Academy who built up this football program where they run double sessions in the summer sometimes, or they have extra practices as early as they possibly can.
7-on-7s, right?
Yeah. Whereas different high schools might wait an extra week to get into their preseason or that beginning in the summer. So that's also a factor of it. And then it's also like what you get out of it as an athlete. Me personally, I was in the broadcasting was my thing. I knew that I wasn't going to have time to play a high school sport and broadcast at the same time, and so I chose broadcasting because TATV and doing everything I could for that to boost up a resume and work on myself and get better was more important to me than playing a sport. And so what I did for athletics was I did a travel team. I did a New England premier team called Velocity, which is a soccer team. And that season ran from November to June, but it was like practices 2 times a week. Indoors, we had a game every Sunday. And then outdoors, we had like 5 or 6 regular season games, then 1 or 2 tournaments. It wasn't that much of a commitment. And personally, I wasn't trying to be the next MLS star, so I wasn't doing all the extra work and the extra training that might be necessary. So that's also a big factor, in my opinion, is what you want to get out of it. So if you want to be a college athlete, if you want to make it to the next level, if you want to get better, then I honestly think that you should be going to the gym and training on your own. I think you should be practicing as much as you can, go to clinics, do all the extra sessions in the summer, stay later, practice new things, get that extra training in. But if you're someone like me who is just doing it for the fun and the activity and the fitness of it, then take the time off. And that's what I did when we had our last tournament, and I'm thinking Memorial Weekend in May or something, time in early June. I didn't do sports until November when Velocity, the new season, started up. And that's how I did it. And I enjoyed that. And I got that break in the summer and even a little bit into the school year as well. So I think it really does depend on the person. And I do think that everybody is different. Some people want to go to the next level, some people don't. I do think that expecting kids who want to do it for fun to do those extra things is not really where we should be. We shouldn't be expecting kids to do all those extra things. But I don't think we're at a point, especially in Maine high school sports, where those things are required. It's more just like optional things that people can do. And so I like the system. I think it's just different for everybody.
Yeah, and again, if you look at, there are safeguards in place, by put in by the NPA saying you can't practice in the off season, but everyone knows everyone gets around that.
Yeah,
football to 7-on-7s. I know lacrosse and all different. They do captains practices. Same with hockey, not just here at our school, but everywhere. So I don't know. It's just interesting as you think of summer camps. It's like that's really the one time. And I'm saying this, excuse me, not just as I'm just saying as an adult, knowing that once you get out of school, summer vacations are a thing of the past, unless you're a teacher. And to have those few and far moments where you actually don't have to work for a living and get the time off. Yeah. To have to go, feel obligated to go to these camps. I don't know. It's a hard thing. It's a two-way street. You want kids to be super trained and you have to keep up with everybody. But on the other hand, I just don't want them to lose a little bit of the last summers that they'll have. But there's always some great camps out there too. Again, not even sports specific, just to stay in shape. I think that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
And I mean, there's also like those camps go into college too. Like for example, I saw this, the other day, I don't know where I saw it, but Rand Pecknold here at Quinnipiac hosts a camp for anybody to come to in, high school athletes, different age groups. I'm not really sure of the age groups, but like just for people to come to. So that those camps going into that high school to college kind of gap. And again, it's all about, do you want to do those for fun? Do you want to do those to get better and get to that next level? Or do you not want to do it because that's not what you like? That's not where you want to be. And so I think it's a good split, and it really does depend on the person. But I'll head into my second topic. This one again happened kind of last week when we were off. Mackenzie Holmes was drafted in the WNBA draft, and as a Mainer, I don't know if I've ever felt or been able to see something on TV like this. First, just really quick thought, and felt pride for my state. Like that, a genuine, like in my body, felt a sense of pride. Like, this is awesome. Like, this is recognition being given to somebody who was incredible. Because honestly, I didn't think she was going to get drafted because of her situation. Now, if you don't know, Mackenzie Holmes, some sort of knee or leg injury. I'm not sure. I'm not going to guess because it's not where I'm at here. But some sort of leg or knee injury that is going to keep her out for the entirety of the 2024-25 WNBA season. And when she kind of posted that she was declining for the draft, she wrote, I read the message, and she basically put, I hope teams will still consider me, knowing the circumstances that she won't be able to play for an entire season. But she was still drafted. 3rd round, 2nd pick to the Seattle Storm. And so my question for you, and what I want to talk about here is how big of a risk is this for a team like the Seattle Storm? Now, obviously, in WNBA, you have 3 rounds. You've got a total of, it's under 40 picks is the total amount of picks you've got. First off, I think in general, I think it's pretty fair to say this is a big risk. But I think also, you kind of think about, will she have an instant impact on this team? Or is this sort of like the Seattle Storm see something in her play at Indiana as, a Big Ten defensive, one of the best defensive players in the Big Ten, if not the country, and says, maybe it takes her 3 or 4 years to get back to where she was, but she'll be there. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on this pick from Seattle, and how long do you think it might take Mackenzie Holmes to get back to that prime high level of play that she's been at for years at Indiana?
Yeah, as far as how long to get back to her prime, it's a tough question, because when you have whatever, again, I don't think she said what kind of knee surgery, but obviously if you're going to be out for a year, you're talking not just maybe ACL, but maybe a microfracture or something like that.
Yeah.
It's impossible to know. I mean, especially, again, you look at, this is a bigger topic we can talk about in the future, but when you look at women's basketball injuries and leg injuries, there's a lot of studies going on right now to figure out, what is the reason for that? Like, they're much more susceptible to ACL injuries specifically. So as far as how long is it going to take for her to get back to her prime, it's going to be tough to tell. I mean, the positive thing is she's going to be at 100%. That's her job, is going to be rehabbing and then practicing, right? And that's the thing. When you take that next step, that's going to be an important thing for her. On the flip side, in terms of, is it a risk for Indiana? Or sorry, not for Indiana, for Seattle? No,
Seattle.
Because it's third round. If they took her in the first round, I'd understand. Sorry, I said Indiana on the thing, and I was like, oh, they're going to Indiana where Creighton Clark is? No. But no, I don't think it's too much of a risk. Again, that she's the third pick for them. She's definitely one of the top 40 players coming out of this year's draft, injured or not. So
100% agree.
Now, if she was a first round pick, obviously that's a huge risk. But again, there's been a lot of discussion about WNBA and salaries and everything else. Like, it's not like it's going to break the bank to keep her on the roster. They're going to rehab her for a year. They obviously see something in her that Indiana did and that a lot of us had done. And I think last thing I'll talk about is the pride part. And I agree with you that this just feels a little bit different. We've had other players in the past playing the WNBA, like Cindy Blodgett, which was, again, a little before my time when she played in Lawrence, but and at UMaine, obviously. For her, it's like I saw her play. Like, I covered her out in Gorham. She played at TA. Like, she played against all of the people that we knew, and now she's going to be playing professionally, which is so cool. And look, even when JP Estrella, if he ends up going to the NBA, it'll feel pretty cool. Cooper Flagg will feel cool, but like I only saw him play once. Like, he played a little bit more up north. It's not. I know he played here in South Portland once. But Mackenzie Holmes just feels a little bit different because, I saw her play for multiple years for Gorham, and now she's going to be playing at the highest level. I mean, nothing but the best of luck to her in her rehab. And if she can just not be a star in the WNBA, just be on a roster for a couple of years, I mean, what an experience that's going to be for her and for the state of Maine. And we'll see where she ends up. I mean, it's one of those things. I saw some interviews with her about how much she just loves Indiana. And when you spend 5 years in a place like that, it'd be interesting to see. Let's say she plays 5 years in WNBA. Where does she end up? Maybe she stays in Seattle. Maybe she comes back to Maine. Maybe she goes back to Indiana. Should be interesting to see. Or coaching, or so many different options for someone as successful as her.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that you made a great point there. Cooper Flagg, to me, it's a guarantee that he's going to the NBA, whether or not he goes to the first overall. That even pretty much is guaranteed, in my opinion. So that pride is still there, but not as much. And then JP Estrella, to me, is more of a stretch. I don't know if he's going to make the NBA. There's still a lot of work he has to do to make that next step in college for us to be able to say, okay, this guy is NBA caliber. So to see how great Mackenzie Holmes was, to see that really tough injury, I was worried. I didn't think she was going to get drafted. I didn't think a team was going to make that jump and say, we want her this bad. We're willing to take a year of her not being able to play. And I was worried because I think she definitely deserved it. And I think you're right. She was one of those top players and, again, deserved to be picked. And so I was glad to see she was. Also to a solid team. Seattle's had a great couple of years in the WNBA. So, but again, really cool and the sense of pride for Maine. I hope that a lot of other people out there in Maine realize how really big this is because there's only ever been one other woman to ever go to the WNBA for Maine, and that was Cindy Blodgett. So this is a huge accomplishment for her and for everyone here in the state of Maine who's been watching her.
So I have a mini trivia question. We're gonna have a real one later, but I'm gonna ask you, who is the highest, as we talk about Cooper Flagg, the highest drafted Mainer in any of the major professional sports ever? And I'll give you a hint. It wasn't Cindy Blodgett. Cindy Blodgett was number 6 overall in the 1998 WNBA draft. But there's been somebody else who was drafted higher than her in one of the major sports.
Do you want to know what's funny? That was my trivia question for you. My question was, what pick and what year did Cindy Blodgett get picked in the WNBA? So I got to come with another question while we're doing the show. All right.
I wouldn't have known that. I would go to the I knew she went top 10, but I didn't know what year at all.
All right. Well, now I got to come with another question now. But to answer yours,
let's see if you know. And if you struggle, I can give you the year and give you the sport.
I'm just trying to think of players that have been drafted. Was Nick
Cantor Medley? No, he was not. I don't think he was drafted at all. No, I'll give you. It's a baseball player, and he probably got drafted around 2005-ish, 2004, 2005.
Is this Ryan Flaherty?
It's not. No. Ryan Flaherty got drafted.
He did get drafted. He played a couple years with the
He
Orioles.
played great with the Orioles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I honestly have no idea, and I think it would be bad for me to just take a random guess. Flaherty was my best guess. So
Flaherty was drafted in the first round, 41st overall in the 2008 draft. But the answer
that's pretty impressive.
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
The answer is Mark Rogers. Mark Rogers was drafted so he was a pitcher. Amazing pitcher. He played at Mount Ararat, and he actually played a few games at Hadlock when he played Portland. He was drafted. I'm picking up the 5th overall pick in the 2004 Major League Baseball draft. Now, Major League Baseball draft, that's legit. They pick hundreds of players. Mm-hmm. Number 5 overall to the Brewers. He played in the majors for a few years. He just got beset by injuries. He was throwing like mid 90s when he was in high school. I saw him a couple times play. He's just a year older than me. But yeah, it's just a small thing. Mark Rogers, he had a 8 or 10 year baseball career between minors and majors, but that's the number now. That's the number right now. 5th overall. And I think we're going to see that beat next year. Speaking of Cooper Flagg, my last, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold right now. That's why I'm trying to hit the cough button here. So speaking of Cooper Flagg, it was announced last week that the UMaine men's basketball team are playing at Durham Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke to start the 2024-25 season on November 4th. It's one of those things where, Duke's paying them quite a bit of money to come down there and get their butt whooped. There is obviously some connections. Cooper never played at Maine or anything like that, but you have Cooper Flagg down there, and it'll be his first game at Durham. Cooper's mom, Kelly, once captained the UMaine women's basketball team about 25 years ago. So the UMaine men's basketball team is interesting. So obviously, as we talked to Jack Webb a few years ago, they're on the up and up. Like they have Chris Markwood, great coach. They were really bad a few years ago. So I'll just give you their records for the last 3 years. In 21-22, they were 6-23, not good at all. Then with last year, or 2 years ago, I should say, 13-17, and then this last year they improved to 15-17. They have their non-conference schedule usually has a couple bigger teams on there. They played Minnesota, FIU, USF. They actually played 6 games in Florida last year. I mean, part of it was a tournament, but I guess they'll spend those November days in Florida. So the question to you is what does this mean for the UMaine men's basketball team? For me, it's a little bit odd. I mean, it's great for UMaine. I don't blame them at all. They're getting paid probably about $1 million to go down there. Win or lose, whatever. It gets them on national TV. I'm sure it'll be live on ESPN because it's Cooper's first game. Mm-hmm. It's odd though because yes, there's the main connection, but it's not like they're playing at Portland. It's not like they're playing Duke at the TD Garden or Duke at the Cross Insurance Arena. I'm not saying that would ever happen. So it's kind of a stretch. It's interesting. So do you think if UMaine goes there and let's just say they lose by 35 or 40?
Which is probably going to
happen, right? Yeah. And it's nothing against UMaine, but it's Duke, and they're going to be, frothing at the mouth. It's just interesting to me. So, what are your thoughts on it? Is it a great idea for the UMaine men's team, or should they really look at it and be like, "Hey, it's exposure. We're getting a payday. We're going to compete." But for me, it's like I don't mind that part of it. But for people to kind of like, "Oh, it's Cooper Flagg's home state's team," that's a little bit of a stretch to me. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, the first thing about it for me is that. Coach Mark Wood's team has been incredible this past year. You talked about that jump up. To me, it's almost like not disrespectful is not the right word, but it's not the recognition that I think that they should be wanting or that we should be wanting. They're not going down because of that jump that they've had where, oh my God, for the last couple of years, they've been a 5-6 win team. And now they had a very, very big jump and a great season and they've had some great talent. No, they're going down because it's Cooper Flagg's home state. Exactly. It's because it's his home state. It's because of the name and where Cooper Flagg came from. And also, as you know, this is how college sports work. It's a first game of the season, blowout win to give them some energy and the crowd some energy and the team some energy. And I don't think that that's what Maine should be wanting is to be just the name because that program is getting better. It's on the come up. It's people who care about the sport and people who are trying to get better. And I think the UMaine has a great chance at making a deep run in the America East playoffs next year for men's basketball. At the end of the day, you're right. They're going to make a bunch of money. It gets them on national television. It's great. It's great for certain parts of the program and the school. But I think as Mainers, we need to look at it for what it is. And this is not about what they did last year. It's about, hey, it's Cooper Flag's home state. So I'm not a huge fan of it. But what a crazy upset it would be. I mean,
Yeah.
and the only it's not going to happen. But that's what I said about last year when Indiana came up to play UMaine women's team at the Cross Insurance Arena, and the UMaine women's team almost beat Indiana.
They did.
Like they almost did, and I never would have thought that would have ever happened. So again, I don't. This is even a bigger gap for me because it's Duke men's basketball. But like, imagine an upset. Or imagine they give them a run for their money.
Not gonna happen.
Imagine. I just imagine.
Oh, you see it all the time. The guys that get paid and then they go end up winning the game. Like you see it in football all the time.
Yeah.
But again, I thought you brought up a great point. Is again, I would understand it more. And again, I'm not blaming UMaine at all. I'm blaming almost like the schedule makers to think like, oh, this is going to be a great angle for that first game. Yeah. But like it's not. Like if again, Mackenzie Holmes, Indiana coming to Maine to play the University of Maine, that's cool. Duke, if they ever came to Maine to play, Maine, that's cool. I don't care how much Maine loses by there. It's just weird. It's just weird for me. Good for Maine to get exposure, but I just, and look, a lot of this is for Jack Webb. We'll have to say like, look, this doesn't mean that UMaine basketball, men's basketball has arrived, right? Okay, yes, they're on the up and up. Let's get them to an over 500 season first. Let's get them to maybe an America's championship game before we start crowning them the next big things. But I don't know, it'll be an interesting game. I mean, I'll certainly watch. I'm a Duke fan. So I'm so salivating over all of the Duke haters that are going to have from Maine that are going to have to like bite their tongue and cheer for Duke for 1 year. I know they're all going to say like, well, I hope Cooper Flag averages 30 a game and Duke loses every game. No, you're going to have to cheer for them to win a little bit, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, and the one point I want to make is because I may not have made this clear in my first part of this is that this is not me saying that UMaine men's basketball or any of people in the athletic department should have said, nah, we don't want to take this.
Right.
Of course they're going to go down. I'm 100% behind you because that money is incredibly important to the growth of that program. So 100% go down. I would never say don't go down, don't do this because it's bad recognition of this team. I just think that overall, as fans, need to look at it for what it is, and it's not maybe the greatest idea.
It's kind of a non-story. That's where it come down to.
Yeah.
For me, I saw that, and I'm not like, whoa, UMaine playing Duke, because like, no, they played big teams before. I was just like, all right, so they're going to go down there. It's Cooper Flag's home state's team. Whatever. I'm not going to I was going to watch the game anyway, regardless of who they were playing, so.
Yeah.
But we'll worry about that in November. We've got another 6 months for that.
Yeah. So we'll finish up the rundown with just some playoff, I would say, predictions, but we're kind of already in there. So like half predictions, half we've seen a couple of games in both the NHL and the NBA. So first, obviously, the Bruins lost last night, or because it's Tuesday, but by the time this gets posted, Game 3 will have been played. But the Bruins and Maple Leafs are in a tight series. Game 2 was great. Game 1 was pretty much a blowout, and then Game 2, Montreal had a great. It's not Montreal. Oh my gosh, Toronto had a great game, and then the Celtics. Yeah, and the Celtics pretty much run through the Heat in Game 1. Again, Game 2 will happen by the time this gets posted. I have high hopes for those two teams. I think Boston's going to beat Toronto. It's not because of a curse. I just think they're a better team. If the Celtics lose to the Miami Heat, I will burn my Jason Tatum jersey. That Miami Heat team has no Jimmy Butler. I would bet every penny to my name that they win this series. I don't care if it's in 4. I don't care if it's in 7. They're going to win. The West Coast, in my opinion, just run through my quick thoughts here, and then we'll go into our predictions. But the West Coast looks really, really strong in the NHL for me. I think the Avalanche and Winnipeg being a 2 and a 3 in the Central is crazy. Those two teams could be ones. Dallas and Vegas is going to be a great series. Nashville's starting to give Vancouver a little bit of a run. Edmonton played really well. I just think overall the games have been great. And I think you're going to see the strongest team 100% come out of there, and it's going to be a run for whatever in the East. And I think that's a change from years in the past where you look at, okay, the East, whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference is going to be the team that's going to win the Cup. And obviously Vegas won last year, and we've had teams in the West win. But overall, I think the East has always been looked at as a better conference, but I think the West is a really strong one as well. And being at that Rangers game also, the Capitals are nothing. There's just nothing there. No. And then I think OKC is a huge upset in the NBA playoffs for me. That first game against the Pelicans, what happened? OKC did not play well, and I don't think they're going to be able to sustain a run with a bunch of young guys like that. But first, I'm going to go through my predictions, and I'll let you run through whatever you want to run through. So, obviously, we could sit down and break this down, but nobody wants to listen to me talk for an hour about why I think, Tampa Bay is going to beat Florida. Florida.
Most people couldn't name any players on those teams. Is he still in Tampa?
Oh gosh, you're like 7 years too late. But in the NHL, we'll start in the NHL. I think Boston beats Toronto. I think Florida beats Tampa. I think the Rangers win. Carolina wins. Edmonton, Vancouver, Dallas, and Winnipeg. In the semifinals, as you can guess for the divisions, is what you can call it. I have Boston beating Florida in somewhat of an upset in 7 games. I just think Boston right now, with what I've seen through 2 games, it's a very, very, very strong team. I think the Rangers beat Carolina pretty handily. I think Edmonton defeats Vancouver. I just don't think Vancouver saw enough for a long playoff run. And I think Dallas beats Winnipeg. I've got the Rangers over Boston, which is so tough to say, but I know my dad, if he listens to this, is going to be cheering because he's a Rangers fan. I just don't think the Boston is as good as New York. And I think Dallas beats Edmonton because Connor McDavid just can't get it done. I just don't think he's ever going to get it done in Edmonton. It's just not going to happen. I think the Rangers beat Dallas. I think the Rangers show that finally break the President's Trophy curse. They show they're the best team. Another big factor here is I think that the Rangers win all of their series by six games or less. No team takes them to 7. I think they just pretty much run it through. And the Rangers win a cup for the first time since 1994. 30 years later, they get that cup and they win that one. And then in the NBA, I've got the Celtics beating the Heat. I've got the Knicks beating the 76ers, Milwaukee defeating the Pacers, Cleveland running through the Magic, OKC beating the Pelicans in a long series. And I've got Denver beating the Lakers, Minnesota Timberwolves beating the horrible Suns, the Clippers defeating Dallas. I've got Boston over Cleveland easily. I've got the Knicks upsetting the Bucks, which it's not. Well, if you look at the seeding, that's technically not an upset, but I think everybody in America thinks it's an upset because the Bucks, I think, are better than the Knicks. And then the Clippers beat OKC. That's the veteran versus guys who haven't played in the playoffs type of series. And then Minnesota takes down the Nuggets. I've got the Boston Celtics beating the New York Knicks. Everybody at Quinnipiac who's a Knicks fan, take that. The Celtics are better. And then I have the Timberwolves beating the Clippers in 7 games. The Celtics play the Minnesota Timberwolves in a very weird NBA Finals series because it's just 2 teams that you never would have thought would match up. It's a 7-game series. It's incredible. The Celtics win. Tatum finally gets recognition. It's the year of the Celtics. Go ahead. Give me what you got for the playoffs.
You go to one Rangers game, and now you're crowning them the next Mark Messier.
No. Whoa. They were President's Trophy winners. Yeah.
So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to say this for my quick thoughts. The 76ers are a joke. Oh, my gosh. The way that they lost that game last night, again, tough. They got a tough break on Brunson's 3 that front rimmed and then went in. Mm-hmm. Maybe some foul calls. They are a joke. Look, I think my overall points of the NBA, Celtics, again, I have their over-under, and this is going to come back to haunt me. Their over-under on losses in the Eastern Conference at 2.5. I'll take the under. I don't think they lose more than 2 games in the first 3 rounds of this thing. They're going to roll through the Heat. Again, without Jimmy Butler, if they had Jimmy Butler, they'd still win probably 5 or 6 games. I don't think there's anybody else in the East that can hang with the Celtics at all. When they get to the championship, they're going to play the Nuggets, and it's going to be a toss-up. I don't know what's going to happen. My only worry about the Celtics is like the coaching, right? So 2 things. Joe Mazzulla, how's he going to do in that crunch time again? And then how's Tatum going to do in crunch time? He's a great player. He's a top 10 player. Is he top 5 player?
Triple-double in game 1.
He's not a top 5 player in my mind until he wins a championship or at least shows that he can hit the big shot.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the rest of the NBA, the West, I think the Nuggets got it. I think Lakers gave them the best shot last night. I have a lot of Knicks friends that are college friends. So I wake up in the morning and I had 120 texts on my thread just being like, "Oh, we're so done. We suck. Oh my God, he hit so."
Everybody is a Knicks fan here. Oh my God, everybody's
a Knicks fan. That's a cool thing to be
fan
right now. Everyone's like Jalen Brunson. They remind me a lot of the Celtics with Isaiah Thomas. Like Brunson reminds me a lot of Isaiah Thomas. Great player, Can he lead them? A little bit injured, not sure. So the NBA, I think Celtics Nuggets. I don't know what could happen. It's gonna be a toss up, but I think the Celtics roll through that. In hockey, I will say a couple things. I really enjoyed the Islanders losing last night, mostly for personal reasons.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of watch parties with Frankie Borelli. But the Bruins, I'll say this: my Stanley Cup prediction is Oilers over Panthers. Okay, that's my Stanley Cup prediction.
Okay.
It's interesting too when you look at the Bruins and look at the standings between like them, Florida, and Toronto. Not a whole lot of win differences, but the Bruins had a ton of overtime losses, like 15 overtime losses. So they could have, the ranking could have been. Now, obviously, the thing for the Bruins, I think they win this series. Not because of the curse. I just don't think that Toronto's that good.
Yeah, exactly.
The goalie thing is obviously the major thing. Now, I thought playing Omark last night was the right move if you're trying to be the least, and it's hindsight. Mm-hmm. Going into the game, I was like, if you want to have the least amount of second guessing and chaos, because look, if you play Swayman in game 2, if he wins, you have to play him the rest of the series. You can't 100%. Go 2-0. If he loses, right, and then you play him for 2 games, and then you put in Omark, it's like, okay, are you doing this because you were going to do a 2-2, 1-1-1 thing, or are you doing it because he lost? And then that's putting in Omark, win or lose. If Omark wins, you're up 2-0, and you can keep doing the back and forth thing. If you lose like last night, you can go back to Swayman and just say, well, we're going to do 1-1-1. So from a PR perspective, I thought it was the right move. He didn't play that great. I mean, it's not the only reason.
Still a good game. Still a good game overall.
Great game.
I don't think Boston played horrible. I think Toronto just got the better of them at the end.
I don't think the Bruins. I think they'll end up losing in the second or third round. I don't think they're going to lose because of the goalie situation. I think they're going to lose because they have two great scorers. They have Marchand. They have Pasternak. Who's going to be that third guy? And that's really. And again, I'm not a big
Pavel Zacha, baby.
Yeah, but again, you need a guy who's going to play well for a month, right? And as I watched some of the pundits saying, like, that's where they're like, I just don't see them, getting over that hump, because having that third guy like Bergeron in the past, or Torrey Krug, whatever guys that would come up.
Pundits? Are you still over in England?
Pundits. That's what they call the hockey experts, or whatever. So, but I mean, look, I thought it's been an interesting playoff. This is a really interesting week. We have, the playoffs round 1, which is kind of nuts in both leagues. Plus, you have the NFL draft coming up on Thursday night. So, pretty cool week of sports, I got to say, for a non-football season.
Yeah. A lot of great topics in that rundown, but that's going to do it for this week. And we're going to head into our interview. And I got to say, this one has been special, getting ready for it. I am super, super excited to share that we're going to have Dale Arnold on, someone that I looked up to and watched for years. Just a great host on NESN, a great announcer, and also a great author, which we'll talk about in this interview. So we want to welcome in Dale Arnold. All right, we want to welcome in our guest for this interview. It is Dale Arnold, a former NESN host and play-by-play announcer, and the author of his book, Tough Guys. Very, very excited to have you on, Dale. It's not somebody we've wanted to have on here, and so excited to have you. Before we really get into anything, the first question we want to ask you is about Jack Edwards. Obviously, retired, or is planning to retire after the season is over. So just want to get your quick thoughts about what it was like working with him, about his historic career, and just about that stuff.
Well, Jeff and Zach, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it. Jack is going to go through here, when this first round series is over, because the first round is all the games NESN has. To the second round and on from there, it's all network stuff. So somewhere at the end of this series, hopefully a win and moving on, but whenever it happens, he's going to go through what I went through a year ago. When the Florida Panthers scored in overtime in Game 7, my career was over, and you had to sort of deal with the jolt that is. I said on X, I think, not long after Jack announced his retirement, I don't think I've ever met anybody who has more fun doing his job than Jack does. He's enthusiastic, he's fun, he loves doing it. And there were certainly hockey fans of other teams out there who didn't like Jack at all, but Bruins fans loved him. And he certainly developed a fan following throughout New England that was pretty strong and pretty impressive. I wish Jack nothing but the best. He has been a credit to the Bruins, but to my profession as well, something that I made a living at for a long time. And I'm hoping that everything goes great for Jack from here on out.
Yeah. So want to head right into your book. It's called Tough Guys, for those who may not know, was written last year. But before we go into any of the details of the book, I want to ask you, when did this idea sort of come about? When was this in your mind? You were like, this is something I want to do. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to get the interviews. I'm going to talk to the guys, and kind of where did that idea kind of sprout from?
It probably lodged most importantly when I was writing my second book, which was Sean Thornton's biography that I wrote with Sean. If you've been around hockey at all, at any level, but particularly the professional level, and I've been around it, since I got out of college in 1979, you know that there's a group called hockey players, which are the best athletes to deal with professionally of all. But then there's a subset within that group, and it's tough guys. It's enforcers, and they might be the best of the best to deal with. Throughout my career, I've had such respect for what they do to make a living and how hard it is to do what they do. And in the course of working on Sean's book, I thought, Sean's got such a riveting story to tell, and I'm really happy that we got a chance to do it. But, I know some other tough guys out there, and they've got stories to tell as well. I ran it by my publisher, Triumph Books, and told them what I had in mind, and they said, go for it. And the very first call I made was to Terry O'Reilly, because I couldn't imagine writing a book called Tough Guys and not including Terry O'Reilly in that book. So he was the very first guy that I talked to. But then I had a chance to talk with a bunch of other guys and get their stories and let them tell their tales. And I had a blast working on it with all of those guys.
In the introduction to the book, you talk about the rules of fighting, as they say in the NHL, or at least what they used to be. Do you think those still stand today? And how does a player like Matt Remke affect fighting and these overarching rules of fighting? You still see fighting in the game, but as somebody who remembers, maybe not Terry O'Reilly, but the late 90s, early 2000s, obviously the game's changed quite a bit. So where do you think the rules stand right now here in 2024?
Yeah, tough guys, by and large, call it the code. And Sean, in the course of writing his book, Sean kind of set forth, the parts of the code. You never pick on anybody smaller than you. You as he says, you never go after somebody to start unless they deserve it. You never take advantage of a guy, when you've got him at a competitive disadvantage. As he would say, I've got my sweater pulled up over my head and I can't see what I'm doing. I'd like to think the other guy's going to stop throwing punches because I would stop throwing punches at him. You always, always, always defend a teammate. And those parts of the code, I think they're the same today as they were when Terry played, when Sean played. As far as Matt Remke is concerned, based on the limited amount that I've seen of him, I think he tries to abide by the code. I really do. I've seen some clips of some of his minor league fights. I've seen what he's done at the NHL level. Now, I will say this, and when he started fighting everything that moved for the first couple of weeks that he was, in the league, I thought they got to do this kid a favor and back him off because it's a tough way to make a living to begin with. And if you're literally fighting every single night, you're going to have a very short career here. He has backed off, I'm happy to say. He doesn't have to take on every challenge. He doesn't have to accept every offer that's made to him. Hey, you want to go? There are times when you say no. And all the tough guys know that there are times when you say no. And I think based on what I've seen, he's kind of learned that it's okay to say no now and then.
Yeah, for sure. So when you look at the array of players that you have in this book, and me personally, a lot of them, I didn't really know their stories, and so I got to learn a lot. But when you were setting this up, were all of the players you chose like no-brainers to you? Were these people that you said immediately, this is someone I have to have in the book? And then maybe with somebody that maybe wasn't a no-brainer, if there was any, were there any stories that, you had your own personal account of, but then the perspective you got from the player about the story or fight or something specific was a lot different?
I knew Bobby Robbins, reasonably well. I wasn't close friends with him, but I knew him. He was a legend at the UMass Lowell. In Providence, he was such a player for the Providence Bruins that when the fans voted their all-time team, they voted Bobby Robbins on their all-time team. Not exactly the sort of thing you would expect from a guy who's an enforcer. I wanted to talk to Bobby despite the fact that his NHL career lasted 4 games. because of concussions and because of, head trauma. And he's the guy, I had begun to rethink how much I liked fighting long before I talked to Bobby Robbins. But he's the guy who really cinched it for me when, in the book, he admitted that at one point he had the gun cocked and in his hand and was thinking, is this it? Is it time to go? And thank God he didn't. Bobby has just come out with his own book right now, in fact, and I'm very proud of him. But yeah, he was a guy who gave me pause. The other guy that I'd say probably in a different way, when I started accumulating these stories, I realized that I really kind of knew all of these guys to varying degrees, was friends with most of them. And I said, I need to talk to somebody I don't know. And more importantly, I need to talk to somebody I don't like. Because I liked all these guys. Most of them were friends of mine. So I reached out through the grapevine and I made contact with Matthew Barnaby, who I didn't know and didn't like. And then over the course of working on his chapter in the book, damn it, I ended up liking him. Not my intent at all. But he's like, tough guys out there all over the place. When you get to know them, when you get to talk to them, you end up liking them. All of them have stories to tell. All of them are enthusiastic about the opportunity to tell them. And all of them, I thought, brought a different flavor to the book overall.
Yeah, I want to talk. You mentioned Terry O'Reilly before, and I'm going to admit, for those in my generation and younger, we know Terry O'Reilly through the movie Happy Gilmore, right?
Well,
that's the first.
Well, yeah,
exactly. So, but what I thought was fascinating in the book, I mean, I knew him a little bit as a player, but you talked about his prowess as a coach, and obviously his coaching career was very short, a lot because of the health issues of his son. And I think you mentioned in there saying like he was on path to be a pretty good NHL coach. Talk a little bit about that and like what could have been had he not had to really step away from the game, do you think?
It's funny because I'm working on my fourth book right now. And what I did with tough guys, I'm now doing with coaches. And each coach is a different chapter and I'm, evolving stories that way. And my premise going in is that if you're a star player, if you're a great player, you're probably not going to be a very good coach. There's a story of when Bobby Orr, he went to the Chicago Blackhawks. I have a hard time with the terminology for that one. It still grates on me. When he went to the Blackhawks, he was on the ice for his first practice, and they're working on the power play. And Bobby's out there, and he's saying, and I go here, I do this, and then you go there, and then you do this, and you do this. And one of the players stops and said, wait a minute. I'm not Bobby Orr. And the stuff Bobby Orr did, he didn't think about. The stuff Wayne Gretzky did, he didn't think about. He just did. And great players, in my opinion, sometimes have a hard time explaining what it is they do. Now, Terry O'Reilly was a very good player, a much better player than he gets credit for, and a much better player than he jokes about. But he wasn't a star. And he was self-made. And he had to work his butt off to make himself into a very good NHL player. That's the kind of guy who makes a great NHL coach. And Harry Sinden told me he was on the road to being an excellent coach. And you mentioned, his son Evan had some health issues, and Terry really felt he had to be home with his wife and with his son. And I respect the hell out of him for making the decision that he made. So did Harry Sinden, by the way. But I'd love to have seen what could have been if, health issues had been different for Evan, if Terry had been able to continue on in that path.
It was crazy too, just mentioning some of the stories that you mentioned when he was a coach, the one about the car that was blocking. I just think when I hear stories like that, could that happen nowadays with social media, with everyone with a cell phone camera? I just wonder, some of those athletes, they must be kind of feeling fortunate that they were doing those things back in the 80s and early 90s before cell phones. I can only imagine. Yeah,
that's probably fair. And, Terry's case, he's not on social media now.
Probably good.
Wasn't social media back then. But yeah, you're right. In this day and age with cell phones and in effect a camera in every pocket, who knows what would have been shown. The story about the bus being blocked in Hartford, and the entire team got off the bus and tried to move the car and couldn't do it. And so Terry sort of broke a window and put it in neutral, and they shoved it out of the way. But he also left a note, explained everything, said, I'll take care of everything. here's my number, here's my name, you tell me what you need. And this Nimrod put out a warrant for his arrest. So yeah, things are different now, probably not in a good way for many of these guys. I think about what it must be like, and I'm just using this example now. A guy like Connor McDavid, can he go out at night? Can he go out and have a beer with a buddy? Can he go out and have dinner with, I'm not even sure if he's married, his wife or girlfriend? Can he do that? Or has he got people with phones, staring at him wherever he goes and whatever he does? It's got to be very hard for those guys now.
Certainly not in Canada, I wouldn't think, or Edmonton at the very least.
It would be probably pretty difficult. Guys tell stories all the time of, the bus would pull in at a hotel at 2 or 3 in the morning, and Bobby Orr would stand there signing autographs for hundreds of people. They always knew where the hotel was. They always knew, how to find him. But what would it be like for I know what it's like for Bobby in Boston right now. And there's so much respect for him that people kind of leave him alone. But, it's who's that? I know who that guy is. And it would be very difficult for a guy like Bobby or Connor McDavid or David Pasternak or those guys to be out there in the public on a regular basis, and they probably just avoid it.
One of the most interesting things to me in the book was this kind of connection and this kind of looking into this, how does the phrase tough guy play into being a fighter? How does it not? What's the differences and similarities? So I guess I want to ask, do you think that those two terms, tough guy or tough player and fighter, are those synonymous?
No.
Or is that something that maybe has changed from, a long time ago in the NHL to now?
I don't think they're synonymous. I mean, I'm the one who chose the title for the book, and it does apply to the guys I wrote about. But I'll give you a perfect example of a guy who everybody who's ever played with him says, that might be the toughest guy I've ever played with. He's not a fighter at all, was never a fighter at all, and that's Patrice Bergeron. This guy played through Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final against the Chicago Blackhawks with broken ribs and a punctured lung and finished the game. And then, after the game, got rushed to the hospital and spent the next few days, in a hospital bed. That's tough. That guy was and is tough. Not a fighter, but tough as they come. So they're not necessarily linked in the way some people might expect. The guys in the book are all tough guys, but there are tough guys who don't fight too.
Absolutely. I want to ask, you brought up a CTE and concussions earlier, and it's tough because, as you mentioned, there are, the NHL and fighting, it's a tradition. It's something that most fans don't want to see taken out of the game at the pro level, but there's such a sensitivity, not only in hockey, in every sport, about concussions. So how do you we as a society and hockey fans, what can we take away from a story like Bobby Robbins, but also preserve what people like about the NHL?
Well, and it's one of the reasons, that I began to rethink. When I was doing play-by-play, both at the minor league level and at the NHL level, I loved calling fights. I mean, I loved calling fights. It was so much fun. I didn't like bench clearing brawls, which used to be a weekly occurrence in the minor leagues when I started my career. And then, they did away with those. But I liked calling fights. And then I started thinking, it was Gord Kluzak who got me thinking about it first. Gord was one of my color guys, one of my analysts, on NESN. And Gordy was tough, 6'6". There's a legendary fight of he and Jim Kite. If you see the video of it, I mean, they are just throwing haymakers. And it was Gordy who said to me, this is having an effect on these guys. And he and I used to actually have disagreements, and not arguments because he'd kill me, but just, we'd have disagreements. And no, it's great. And he'd say, it's still having an effect on guys. Now, every guy I talked to in the book, without exception, every single guy said, I do it all over again. I knew what I was getting into. I knew what the rules were. I knew what the job entailed. I would do it again in a heartbeat. But some of them are acknowledging that they're starting to think about it a little bit. I asked several of the guys, as you guys know, there is no test for CTE. The only time they can diagnose you with CTE is after your death. And I would say to these guys, if there was a test you could take today that would tell you if you had CTE, would you do it? Most of them said, I don't want to know. I don't want it because it would affect how I live the rest of my life. and what I do from this point on. And most of them said, no, probably not. I found it interesting because not long after I spoke with Chris Nyland for the book, and after the book came out, I read where Chris, I believe, has made an agreement to donate his brain to the CTE study at Boston University. So he's wondering about it. PJ Stocks said to me, sometimes I wake up in the morning and I say to my wife, do I not remember things just because I'm old and I don't remember things? Or do I not remember things because I got punched in the head too many times in my life? And that was a guy who, for every punch he landed, it seems like he took 6. And he knows there's been an effect. He doesn't know how dramatic it's going to be. They all know that there's been some effect, varying degrees for these guys. Not everybody's the same. But it is a concern for most of them. And if you're a guy, you mentioned Matt Remke before. And that's why I said the way he started, you can't do that. We know now what we didn't know then. You can't do that. And thankfully, as I said, he seems to have backed that off a little bit.
Yeah. One pleasant surprise for me was seeing the Maine Mariners mentioned a lot throughout the book, something I really enjoyed. And I think a lot of that had to do with their affiliation with the Flyers back in the day. But, one of the things in the book was how tough that team was, for years, how tough that team was. And so it made me think about this culture of toughness, of fighting, of grit, that gritty style of hockey that I think is with Boston, obviously, but also with Maine. And do you think that Boston fans and Maine Mariners fans, or even Providence Bruins fans are still kind of clinging on to that, I'm going to go watch a hockey game tonight because I want to see a fight type of mentality?
As Don Cherry said to me, nobody ever goes to get a popcorn when a fight breaks out. And I do think that New England fans as a whole, I'm stereotyping here, but for the sake of making the point, I think New England hockey fans as a whole enjoy the rough stuff. They enjoy the fighting. Now, as you mentioned, when the Mariners began their play in the American Hockey League, they were the AHL affiliate of the Philadelphia Flyers, the Broad Street Bullies. And they intentionally set about replicating what they were doing in Philadelphia in Maine. And they did. I mean, some of the guys that I spoke to in the book, guys like Dave Brown and Archie Henderson, they were certainly, incredibly tough guys. If I wanted to write, 5,000 more pages, I could add guys like Mel Hewitt and Alan Stewart and Jim Cunningham and the list, Glenn Cochran, the list would go on and on and on. I wanted to write about the guys from Maine because I knew them and I was friends with them and I knew what their stories were like. But I literally could have written an entire book on tough guys centered strictly on the Maine Mariners, but I'd have a very narrow purchase base, I think.
True. Well, you mentioned one of the stories in there includes John Shannon, and obviously a little bit of different perspective. Why do you think it was important to bring his kind of producer/broadcaster perspective into this book?
I wanted somebody to tell me how the NHL looked at fighting, and more specifically, how the TV networks looked at it. And it was fascinating talking to him. And again, this was back in the day when there were still bench clearing brawls, and he talked about the director would have a code word, and everybody would have an assignment. Camera A, you're shooting the home bench. Camera B, you're shooting the visiting bench. And as soon as this code word was said by the director, the cameras all went to whatever their specific assignments were. And he talked specifically about how they covered it, what they would show, how they would handle replays. You didn't want to glorify it necessarily, but you also knew what your fan base was looking for. You knew that they wanted to see certain things, and I've known John for a long, long time, but I loved talking to him about it because I wanted to get that perspective. John, after he left, the broadcast network in Canada, he went to work for the National Hockey League, and he worked in their broadcast department at the NHL level. And John would get tasked from time to time of calling up a play-by-play announcer and saying, "Okay, you need to stop ragging on the referees the way you are. Be upset about a call, that's fine, but don't call into question a man's integrity," and things like that. So John got to see what it was like, both on the ground, calling a game, doing a game, but then also from a league perspective, what they saw as well.
Definitely. And I know Zach and I both have done a lot of play-by-play commentating over the years. And unfortunately, at the high school level, fighting's not allowed. So
no, it's not.
As you mentioned before,
I'm glad it's not allowed.
Exactly. But it's like but you mentioned the excitement of for play-by-play guys to be able to call an NHL fight. I could definitely think Zach and I would have enjoyed that at least at one time. I want to mention a guy that we all know, especially here in New England, who people would probably call tough, but not a fighter, and that's Zdeno Chara. And I bring that up because obviously he's synonymous with the Bruins' success over the past 15 years. And also seeing him in the news now running 2 marathons in basically a week. I mean, he is what you would call a freak athlete. But talk about him a little bit in terms of, obviously he's a monstrous human being, such a huge part of the Bruins, so tough with all the injuries, playing with, his mouth wired shut many times, but not really a fighter. Why do you think, like, when did he, why did he not take that next step, do you think, into enforcer role? Or is it too important for him to stay on the ice?
No, because he was afraid of what he could do. And I'm serious about this. I talked to Andrew Ferentz about Zdeno at one point. And Andrew said to me, he said, Dale, you got to understand something. He could kill someone. And he probably knew that. And Andrew told me a story where Z was in a fight. I think it was against the Ottawa Senators. Zdeno's on his back. This guy's on top of him. And they're literally this far apart. And Zdeno just went, boom. Punch went about 6 inches and knocked the guy out. Knocked him out. Now he's 6'9". He has like 0% body fat. All of the physical testing records that the Bruins had for years and years that Ray Bourque held, Zdeno Chara broke them all. And now, as you mentioned, he runs the Boston Marathon on Monday and he runs the London Marathon on Sunday. He's running these 50-mile ultra marathons and things. He is a freak athlete, but he literally is a guy who, if he wasn't careful, could seriously hurt somebody. You think about the Max Pacioretty hit in Montreal, where he wasn't doing anything dramatic. He was checking a guy into the glass, the corner glass at the bench area there, and he sent Max Pacioretty to the hospital. And he sent Montreal Canadiens fans to their phones calling the police because they wanted Zdeno Chara arrested, literally wanted him arrested for the hit, and sent the engineers all around the NHL back to all of these arenas and changing that glass to that curved piece at the end of each bench, all because of this one hit. He is and was as tough a player as ever put on skates. I have never heard anything at the Garden like I heard the night for introductions when he came out with the bubble on and his jaws wired shut, days after having his jaw broken, and played the entire game as if there was nothing wrong with him, for crying out loud. But I think he was always cognizant of the fact that he had to be a little bit careful because of how he was physically.
Yeah. You mentioned that introduction. Even being at home, I remember being at home and watching that and like getting goosebumps. Just being able to see that on TV. So as you mentioned, must have been such a crazy moment in person. But to wrap up the book talk, I want to ask you, what is the one big thing or the one kind of note that you want readers to take away from this book?
I think I said this in the introduction. That everybody knows. The names of Connor McDavid and David Pastrnak and Austin Matthews. They're the stars, the stars that the media gravitates to, the fans gravitate to, because they're that important. But that there's a segment of the hockey population who are just as valid in how they make a living, who are just as respected in what they do for a living, and I wanted to give these guys a chance to have a voice. Everybody hears from all the big stars. How many people hear from PJ Stock? Now in Canada, he's a big media star, so they probably hear from him a lot now. But, it was different. And I just wanted to give these guys an opportunity, and I wanted fans to get a chance to see what these guys were like. And I hope after they read the book, and, you guys were so nice to read through it, I hope everybody got a little better feel for what these guys were like as people, not just players.
Yeah, you mentioned it there, and I think I did mention this a little earlier. A lot of these guys I've read a little bit about, heard a little bit about, but not people that I was able to see. And so getting to read about those stories, a lot of them were super interesting, and just being able to increase my knowledge about Bruins hockey and other parts of the NHL as well was really incredible. But obviously a great book, and I had a great time reading it. I'm assuming Jeff did as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And excited to hear this one about coaches as well. It seems like you've got this one working up as well.
I'm about 50,000 words in right now. I got a little ways to go yet. And it's primarily focused on NHL coaches. But as I was working on the book and I was thinking about it, I thought, you know what? There's somebody else I got to talk to here. So I made 2 phone calls, and week after next, I'm going to go to lunch in Boston with the guy who's won more games than any college coach in the history of the game, and the guy who has the second most wins of any college coach in the history of the game. And I'm just going to sit and have lunch with Jerry York and Jackie Parker. And I'm going to turn my recorder on, and I'm going to set it in the middle of the table, and I'm going to shut up.
I'm a BU grad, and I was there during Jack Parker's era. And as much as we despise BC, Jerry York is just a legend.
How can you not love that guy?
I mean, it's just we wanted to hate him so bad, but we just couldn't. Like, you just can't. And same with Jack Parker. I mean, he's just what a great rivalry we were so blessed to have for so many years in college hockey in Boston.
Well, there'll be a chapter in the book.
Great.
And I'll just give you one other chapter, just because what the hell, I'll tell you this stuff. The other chapter that I thought was going to be difficult because I couldn't talk to the coach was Herb Brooks, who I think was the coach of the single greatest coaching job in the history of hockey. And obviously Herb passed away in an automobile accident, so I couldn't talk to him. So instead, I'm going to tell Herb's story, or I have told it, the chapter's done. I'll tell his story through the eyes of Jack O'Callahan, Jim Craig, and Mike Ruzioni and others. And it's kind of fun.
Great.
That'll be great. So to finish up, we want to talk a little about your career in sports media and sports broadcasting, and being a Maine podcast. We want to start with your roots in Maine. So obviously you started at Bowdoin College and then went to the Maine Mariners. So just talk a little bit about your start in broadcasting and what that transition was from calling college sports to the Maine Mariners at that level.
I actually started. I did games and got paid for it when I was 15 years old. I did Brunswick High School football on the 80,000 watt radio station in Brunswick. And it was kind of amusing because at one point the radio station got purchased by these 2 guys from Minneapolis. And they came in and, had the whole big staff meeting. And at the end of the staff meeting, they said, look, we noticed we've got a football game on the schedule for Friday night. Who does the football games? And I kind of raised my hand. And they looked at me, and one of them said, look, can you do the game Friday until we can hire, an adult to do the games? I thought, okay, so much for that career. So I did the game Friday night. After the game, took the equipment back to the radio station, and one of them was waiting for me, which shocked me. And it's 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night, and he's waiting at the radio station. And he said, we don't really need to hire an adult. We just keep doing the games. So I did football. I did high school basketball. I would play in the JV game and then broadcast the varsity game. And then when I made varsity, my basketball career was over. And then they added Bowdoin hockey to the docket. And the very first hockey game I ever saw live in my life, I broadcast. It was a Bowdoin Northeastern game at Matthews Arena in Boston. I was horrible. I mean, I didn't know the terminology. I was awful. But I worked at it. And I did the games at Bowdoin for 5 years, both before I was a student at Bowdoin and then while I was a student at Bowdoin. And a guy named Ed Anderson was covering the Bowdoin hockey team for the Portland Press Herald. He went to work for the Maine Mariners. He called me when I graduated from college, and he said, we got a guy here who's not going to be here very long. I want you to come down, work for us, attach yourself to this guy's hip, do whatever he does, say whatever he says, whatever he tells you to do, you do. And my first year of pro hockey, I was working with Mike Emmerich. And that is what sort of set things on the road for me. I spent 7 years in the American Hockey League doing minor league games, ultimately got the opportunity to graduate to the NHL with the New Jersey Devils. I gave up my hockey career a little bit because I got a call from Boston, and they said, would you like to interview to replace Kurt Gowdy as the radio voice of the New England Patriots? And I thought, I love hockey and I really like doing it, but it's the NFL. I get back to Boston. It's as close as I'm ever going to get to home. I got the job, surprisingly. I did it for 3 years. And then, luckily got to go back to hockey with the Bruins and continue on from there. But it was always centered around the fact that this is home. I live in Maine now too. It's like I'm home to Maine. I joke with my wife, we're the only retired people I know who move north. But, you want to come home, and that's what I wanted to do, and that's what we did.
Obviously, Dale, a lot of people around here know you for your career at WEEI, and as somebody who grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, for me, shows like, Dennis and Callahan, The Big Show, and of course, Dale and Holly, like those were the shows that I grew up on during one of the golden eras of Boston sports. Just talk a little bit about what your experiences was, first of all, with Michael Holly, who we see every night on our TV here, but also just working at a super successful, but super high pressure radio station. Boston sports radio is the pinnacle of anywhere in the country. And on a day-to-day basis, what was it like in that kind of environment? You're talking sports, it's great, but you're also, obviously, you have a lot of responsibility for that.
I loved it for a long time. And at the end, I didn't love it so much because I thought the job had changed. The genre had changed. It had devolved, in my opinion. Other people love it, but in my opinion, it had devolved into I have a take. Everything sucks. And I didn't have a lot of fun doing that. When we started, when I was with the New Jersey Devils, and I was, across the river from New York, it's when WFAN went on the air. And as a sports fan, and as a guy working in sports, I was thinking, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I thought, if this works in New York and it's hugely successful, the only other city where it might be even better is in Boston. And then when they put EEI on the air and became the first all sports radio station in Boston, I had the opportunity to be part of that first air staff. I was on the air the day we opened the doors, and I was on the air until March 12th of 2022 when I left. And at the beginning, I loved it. But I approached it differently than a lot do now. You don't hear much interviewing now. Back then, I wanted to bring the athletes to the fans because they never got to hear them. When I was doing Bruins games at the Garden, one day and this is the old Garden, by the way, the Boston Garden, the Dome, and I went up the back door of the Bruins dressing room, and I paced. It was 12 paces from that door to the door of the Celtics locker room. And I said to Ray Bork one day, I said, Larry Bird works right over there. You work right over here. You must talk to him all the time. He said, we've never met. When we're in the building, they're not. When they're in the building, we're not. He said, I've never met him. And I got an idea in my head. And I invited both of them to come into the studio with me. And Ray showed up first. Larry was a little bit late because he got a little bit lost finding the place. But Ray was sitting in the studio with me. And the door opened and Larry Bird walked through the door. And on the air, I got to say, Larry Bird, this is Ray Bork. Ray Bork, this is Larry Bird. And they shook hands and they sat down and I shut up. I just tried to stay as quiet as I could and just let them do it and just let them talk about being professional athletes in Boston and talk about, what it was like to be at the tops of their professions, which they both were. Those were things I got to do back then that, you don't hear a lot of. I had Ted Williams on the radio. Ted Williams wasn't talking to anybody. I got to interview Bill Russell on the radio. I got to talk with people that fans had heard about, they'd seen, they'd read about, but they hadn't heard very much. And it was the way I approached the job when we started. And eventually, the show became Dale and Holly through some other iterations. I started solo, worked with Eddie Ambleman on the A-team for a long time, 6 years, I think it was. Worked with Bob Newmeyer, who I loved dearly, and then he left of his own volition. And then I got to work with Michael, and it was the most fun I ever had doing sports talk radio. And I joke about it now. If Michael and I were still working, I might still be doing sports talk radio. I might not have retired because I had such a great time working with him and playing off of him. He was smart. He was funny. He was quick. We became great, dear friends. When my son got married in New Orleans, Michael was at the wedding. And that's the friendship that we had. And I loved everything about working with Michael. And we still talk, from time to time and see. He asks me how my kids are doing, and I ask him how his kids are doing. But that was the most fun I ever had.
Yeah, so obviously you've had a historic career in play-by-play broadcasting. From the Patriots to the Red Sox to the Bruins to Boston College. You've done it all. So, and you've done different types of broadcasting too. Radio and TV, and you've done some hosting on NESN as well. So, talk a little bit about your thoughts on the difference between radio sports coverage and TV sports coverage. Was there one that you prefer doing? One that you think is better? Frankly, might be better, something like that.
I wouldn't say better necessarily. I would say that when I made the shift from radio play-by-play to TV play-by-play, and it's the first lesson I had to learn, and it's a lesson I wish other broadcasters that I listen to would learn, is shut up. They're looking at the play. They're looking at the puck. They're looking at the players. You don't have to do a rat-a-tat-a-tat radio play-by-play for that. Radio, you've got to do it. You're the eyes and ears, and you've got to do everything. When you're doing the game on TV, it's okay to lay back once in a while. It's okay to, when a goal would be scored and I would yell, score or whatever, oftentimes I'd then just shut up. Let the cameras show player celebration, fans, the viewer's seeing all of that. They don't need me describing what they're watching on their TV screen in the middle of a celebration like that. So that was the first thing. The most fun as a play-by-play announcer was doing hockey on the radio. It's like I said, you've got to do it all. You've got to do everything. It's the most fun I ever had. You learned when I started my career with the Mariners, when I would do the games at home, I would work with a guy named Frank Vixeris. You guys are too young, but a legendary figure in the state of Maine. He was the TV sportscaster on Channel 13, and he would do home games with me. But then when we would go on the road, I'd work alone. So we'd pull into the arena in Moncton, and I would lug the equipment cases up to the press box. I would set it all up. I would engineer. I would do stats. I would do play-by-play. I would do color. And then when the game was over, I'd pack it all back up again and lug it all back down and stick it under the bus. It's the best training ground I ever had in my life because you learned everything. Everything about the position, everything you had to do, what you could get away with, what you couldn't get away with, what you had to do to make sure that show got on the air every night. It was the best experience I ever had, and I wouldn't trade a minute of my minor league time with the Mariners for anything.
Great. Dale, last question from me. You mentioned some of the keys of being a good play-by-play guy. We've been so spoiled here in the Boston market. Don Orsillo, Joe Castiglione, Jack Edwards, Gil Santos, Mike Gorman is retiring again after this season. What makes, what advice would you have for somebody like Zach, who's, studying sports broadcasting? You have sports talk radio out there, would you say it's changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years? And in some markets is dying quite a bit. You have podcasting, you have play-by-play. What advice would you give somebody younger about trying to get into sports broadcasting right now?
The thing, I've talked to young people my entire career, and I often get asked, how do I get into it? Well, first of all, for a play-by-play announcer, don't think you're going to start at the major league level, because you're not. You got to pay your dues. I spent 7 years in the American Hockey League, 5 years doing college hockey before that, before I ever got an opportunity to broadcast at the NHL level. And by the way, I wouldn't have been ready to start at the NHL level. And so often you get some kid who's fresh out of college, he's 22 years old and thinks he should, get Jack Edwards' job with the Boston Bruins next year. Not how it works. I'd be shocked if that's the kind of person that they hire. So you got to get experience first. You got to get in front of a microphone or in front of a camera if that's what you're doing. But you've got to work and you've got to get better and you've got to listen to your tapes. You've got to hone your craft. You've got to be willing to accept and give yourself harsh criticism. You can't have thin skin. You've got to be willing to say, you know what, you're right. That really wasn't very good. I didn't do a very good job on that. And you just got to work at it. There was a player who played for the Mariners way back when. a guy named Alan Stewart. Tough guy. I mean, maybe pound for pound as tough a guy as I ever met. And in my position with the Mariners, we would do a lot of school appearances. And I had Alan out in a school appearance one day, and we did the whole equipment demonstration and dressed the little kid up in the whole uniform and everything. And then they set up 2 tables, and we're just going to sign autographs, and then we're going to leave. And his line was moving a lot slower than my line was moving. We had the exact same numbers because they'd go through my line and then go through his line, but his was moving really slow. And I looked over his shoulder, and for every single kid, he wrote, "Whatever you want most wants you." And then he would sign his name and say Mariners. And I thought about it, and I thought, my God, that's the philosophy I want to have for my entire life. Whatever you want most wants you. It ain't going to come dropped into your lap. You know, you got to work for it. You've got to bust your butt to get it. But if you want it, if you really, truly want it and dedicate yourself to getting it, you can do it. So Alan Stewart taught me whatever you want most wants you, and I've tried to live my entire career that way.
So that's an awesome philosophy for sure. So just to finish up, I got to ask you, Game 3 is happening the night that we are recording this interview. In just a little while. You know, tied series so far. Just give me your quick thoughts on what you see from the playoffs, what maybe you want to see in Game 3 or in the series between Boston and Toronto.
Well, just as a fan now, that's all I am as a fan. I said on X after Game 1, if I were Jim Montgomery, listen to me, like I've got a right to tell Jim Montgomery anything. But if I were Jim Montgomery, I'd have gone right back to Jeremy Swayman in Game 2. Having said that, I watched Game 2, and Linus Ullmark had nothing to do with that loss. He was terrific. Montgomery was right, but the team wasn't as good, and the team in front of it wasn't as good. As we're recording this, the game hasn't been played yet, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say Jeremy Swayman's going to play in Game 3. There will be a couple of other lineup changes in there as well. And I want to see how the Bruins respond because they're going into a hornet's nest. Those fans in Toronto, the last time the Maple Leafs beat the Bruins in a playoff series was 1959. To say they're sort of an understatement. So they're going into a hornet's nest for Game 3. I want to see how they respond to it. I want to see, how they perform in front of who I assume will be Jeremy Swayman. When they falter in terms of being too unselfish. They pass up the shot trying to make the perfect pass, and it's okay once in a while to let it go, let the puck fly, and I want to see them do that. When the shot's there, take it. When it's not, that's fine. Win the puck battles. Like every hockey cliche ever said. You got to win the puck battles along the boards. You got to win that ice in front of the net. I found it ironic that the Bruins won Game 1 and changed their goalie. The Maple Leafs lost Game 1 and didn't. You think about it, that doesn't make a lot of sense, if you go about it. But you'll see Samsonov again, I'm sure, and you'll see Jeremy Swayman, I'm sure. And I'll be curious. Look, I didn't think either team was going to sweep this thing. So it's not like I'm shocked to see that the Leafs got to win. They always say until the home team loses a game, everything's fine. Well, the home team lost the game. They got to get it back with a win in Toronto, and I'll be curious to see how they do it.
Great. Dale Arnold, the book is called Tough Guys. Want to tell people where they can pick it up?
Everywhere. Amazon. It's in a lot of the bookstores in Maine. Sherman's in Maine has been very nice to me, and they've got it in all of the locations. I've done some book signings for Sherman's before, but Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Barry Peterson told me they were out on Barnes and Noble when he tried to buy it, but I think they've got it back in by now. And buy it, read it, enjoy it, and get ready for Mentors, which will be book number 4.
Excellent.
That's awesome. We want to thank you again for coming in. Really, really appreciate getting insight, learning more about the book as always, and
hey, how many
wish you good.
Would know that you're both wearing Thornton Academy jerseys?
Not too many. You know? We did not plan this at all, but I just came from work, so
Yeah, I just happen to sport. I like to sport my high school, even here at Quinnipiac. So, it's just a coincidence, I guess.
Not nothing.
Our hockey team's pretty good too. Our hockey team won states a couple of years ago, so we're perennial power now.
Excellent.
Yeah. But again, yeah, thank you for coming in and coming off this interview, and wish you good luck in any future endeavors, and enjoy watching the game tonight.
Thanks, guys. You too. I appreciate your time.
All right, we want to thank Dale Arnold again for coming in for that interview. What a great interview. Really, really special to have him on. And so, yeah, we'll
make sure you buy his book.
Yes, exactly. Make sure to buy that book. Check it out. Just such a great read. But now we're going to head into the take that has nothing to do with sports. And this one comes from a recent trip. I feel like, Jeff, I'm doing a type of travel, transportation one here. I had to drive out of the city after the Ranger game, which was a little stressful in general, but not that
bad. Drove? Like you actually drove?
I drove out of the city, yes.
Oh, my God.
The traffic wasn't bad because of the time of day it was, but I will say, like, the thing about it is you got to be confident. You got to know people are going to cut you off. People are going to make stupid decisions. If you think about that, if you're confident, you're thinking, this is my car. I'm going to drive it. I'm going to be safe. And I was fine. Then I had my dad there. I was fine. The thing I hate about driving in New York City, and everybody knows this, everybody's done it, but like, I'm sitting there, right? And there's a red light. There's 4 cars in front of me. There's probably 8 cars behind me. The light turns green. 0.1 seconds goes by, and the guy behind me is like yelling at his steering wheel and yelling at me and honking. What am I going to do? Sir, what am I going to do? First off, giving me 0.1, no one's going to take off in 0.1 seconds. Wait maybe a couple of seconds before you honk. Even then, that's a little ridiculous. But the just immediate like honking, I gotta go is ridiculous. Second off, there's 4 cars in front of me. What people in New York honk for no reason. And it's being from Maine, you don't really ever have to honk at anybody because there's no traffic, because we're not in super major city areas like New York, but it's just ridiculous. Like, people are so angry and upset and mad. It's almost like they get into their car like they're mad that they have to drive. Well, if you're mad, don't drive. Take a bus, walk, take, a city bike if you want to. But every light, it was like someone was honking at me, and I'm like, what? Why? No reason. I just had to get that out because it was the most angry I've been at people, like in New York, in a different area than Maine, when it comes to driving ever.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting in Europe, at least in England, what they do on the lights is when it's a red light, it'll actually go red and yellow at the same time to let you know that it's about to go green. It's kind of a cool thing. So cool. It gives you a little bit of hints so that you can't honk. But yeah, no, New York drivers are I don't say the worst, because Massachusetts drivers I think are the worst, but New York's not great either. They all got some place to be, Zach. Come on.
But I guess so.
All right, my take has nothing to do with sports. It's going to be about my Euro trip. So again, I went to 4 countries, had a great time, tried a lot of great food. But there's one thing that the USA, us Americans, are getting screwed at. Okay, and bear with me on this. I have this weird tradition now where you try to compare one country to another. And what's the best way to do that? You can do weather, you can do currency, you can do whatever, shopping, but I do food, right? So I'm thinking, what food could I try in basically every country on earth and compare it to the next one? And the answer is McDonald's, right? So over the years, I've gone to Mexico many times. I went to Norway last summer. I've been most places. Now, this is only a recent thing. So I decided when I went on my trip, I'm like, and when I went to Paris last year, or a couple of years ago too, to the Champions League. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to get, and what is the thing that kind of is kind of on the same menu as that chicken McNuggets. Zach, we're screwed in America because of our chicken McNuggets. Every other country in the world has incredible chicken nuggets. And what does that mean? You know that 1 every 10 times you go to McDonald's and you get those nuggets that just came out of the fryer and they're like tempura. And you crunch into that and you're like, oh my God, I could eat 3 of these things, right? So, but most times they have them here, and maybe it's just because the ones in Southern Maine aren't so great. They've all been there. They've been sitting there for a while. Let's just say that. They're chewy. They're gross. They're edible. I still get them, obviously. But I'm telling you, all 4 countries I went to, the nuggets were phenomenal, like perfect. Now, the burgers and fries, they're hit or miss. The nuggets were great. We are getting screwed in this country. We should not allow it. They need to get their act together and be like, Be like Mexico and England and Germany and Switzerland and France and Ireland. Get your stuff together. We deserve better chicken McNuggets.
That caught me off guard. I was expecting you to say like McDonald's prices are better, or like overall the portion sizes are incredible.
There are different items. There were some really cool items overseas. I didn't try most of them, but there were some really cool different burgers and chicken burgers. But like, whatever, I'm not going to try that. But I'm like, I just go to them. I get like a Diet Coke, which unfortunately in Europe it's all paper straws everywhere, which is terrible.
Oh,
but I'll get like a Diet Coke and I'll get like a 6-piece nugget and just walk out, because obviously I'm going to eat my meals in all the more local places, but just to try it. And I'm like, I open up like, these look amazing. What am I supposed to do with this? But anyway,
no,
we're screwed. We're screwed here. We're getting the raw end of the stick on that one.
International demands here from Jeff about we need new nuggets.
You try them. You go somewhere else and you try them and you come back and say like, what are we doing here, America?
Yeah. See, here's an even hotter take than that. I stopped getting McDonald's nuggets because Wendy's nuggets are better.
See, I would say, look, the McDonald's nuggets I was getting overseas are better than Wendy's nuggets, but I agree with you. The way that we get them here, yeah, I'll take Wendy's nuggets. Wendy's nuggets are almost always good, like almost always edible. And then there's Burger King nuggets, which are just gross. But
especially with the spicy nugs,
that's
like my favorite snack when I'm at home. All right, well, we'll now head into the segment that we previewed last week. And going to keep it going here. It is our little trivia segment. Currently, the standings. Zach is 0 of 1. Jeff is 0 of 1. Nobody has gotten one right yet. And now I have to also come up with a show question mid-show now, because Jeff stole it, which is what a crazy coincidence. But I'm going to put you on the spot here. And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, what would Jeff kind of maybe have a chance at knowing, but not know? I would like you, very plain and simple, maybe might even be way too easy for you. Can you name me 10 current players on the Boston Red Sox, pitchers or fielding players?
Okay.
10.
Cassis.
Tristan Cassis.
Cassis.
All right.
Kenley Jansen.
Yep, there's 2.
Duran.
3.
Trevor Story.
I'll give it to you even though he's out.
Yeah, he counts. Come on.
Okay,
Rafael Devers.
5, yep.
And now I'm in trouble.
I don't think this is as hard.
Tanner Houck,
but yes, I'll give it to you. That's 6.
No, I'm struggling. Chris Sale got traded. They don't have Mike Timlin anymore. He got traded in like 2005.
Yeah, you're way too far
I can name
behind.
like the entire roster of 2004.
I don't think
I just be guessing that Marcelo Mayer, but he's in Portland, right? He's the guy.
He's in Portland. Yeah,
I can't think. I can Gutierrez.
No, keep. I really. I'll give you the time to take a couple more seconds to think, because I really think there are some here that are super easy that you're missing out on.
Oh, Yoshida, the DH.
That was 7.
That's 7. Let me think of on the diamond. Who plays catcher for them? God, I don't even know.
You won't get catcher.
No, Story. Who else is pitching for them? Tanner Houck.
I'll give you another hint. This guy just joined this year in free agency and has a record for.
I'm gonna say Galito. He got hurt.
There's 8.
It's 8. All right. What were you gonna say?
So this guy's hit an opening day home run for like the last 5 seasons. He's really, really good, and
what is his name?
He's a leader. He's in the MLB leader right now, I think. Currently, I mean, he's was on a 7-day IL.
I can't think of his name. It's like not Kellogg or something.
No,
Davis.
You're at 8. You need 2 more.
I can't. I have zero idea.
All right.
I would just guess like Hernandez or some generic names. But all right, let's hear some of the more popular ones that I missed.
All right. So that's an X for you.
That's an L. I should get an overtime loss for that, because I did get Tony Blotcher without even knowing it. I think I should be 0-1-1. But anyway, that's just me.
All right. So Tyler O'Neill is that guy I was mentioning. Tyler O'Neill.
I've heard of him.
Sedan Rafaela, who's been really, really good.
I've heard the last name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rob Refsnyder. You bet.
I've heard that name before, but I would have never gotten that.
You got Yoshida.
Who's their pitchers? Oh my gosh.
So Bobby Dahlbeck.
Yeah.
And then pitching, you missed Brian Bayo. Or Brayan Bayo.
I got. He was opening the starter. I should have known that.
Cutter Crawford.
Yeah.
Garrett Whitlock.
I mean, these are names that I'm like, oh yeah, he plays in the Red Sox, but I never would have thought of him.
How about Josh Winchowski?
Never heard of him before in my life.
Oh my gosh, man! Or have you heard about the Cam Boozer story? Have you heard about Cam Boozer recently?
No.
Oh, great story. I'm not going to go into it, but Cam Boozer basically thought his career was over, spent years working his way back up, and finally got an MLB start for the first time.
Oh, wait, is he the guy that was like emotional in the clubhouse?
He had his first start, I think, in like 7 or 8 years.
He's
or maybe,
like 32 or something. And like,
just such a great story. But dang, you were so close. I thought.
Three of those guys are on the IL though, but whatever, you know.
But here's the thing: is that I want you to start doing this. I want you to update yourself on the Bruins and the Red Sox and the Celtics on their rosters, because I think that you need to increase your knowledge of those 3 sports.
The Celtics, I can name most of them, but Bruins, no, I can name.
Yeah, exactly. Bruins and Red Sox.
5 Bruins, maybe 6. But they'll be out of the playoffs.
That's my next week trivia. Trivia.
All right, my trivia question for you as we wrap up here is: we talked about University of Maine men's basketball versus Duke coming up in November. Mm-hmm. Did you know that UMaine and Duke have played one time before down in Durham back in December of 2016? Blue Devils 94, Maine Black Bears 55. My question to you is: can you name one of the players who scored for Duke that day?
Can you give me the year again?
2016. So this would have been the 2016-17 season. They played in December.
26. So here's the thing: is I think you want me to guess Jason Tatum. I think you want me to guess Tatum because that I'm pretty sure is the Tatum era. If I'm correct, I might be a little bit late on that, but I'm trying to think of other Duke players. So
because most of those guys were one and done then, so that's what makes it hard.
De'Aaron Fox and Bam Adebayo were Kentucky during that time. Anthony Davis was Kentucky. I don't know many Duke players. It's definitely not Zion. 2016 when they played Maine. I'm very sad to say I don't know many Duke players who are currently in the NBA.
Or maybe they're not in the NBA anymore. Who knows? Maybe they're pundits or announcers or
Duke. I'm going to say Jason Tatum. And I'm going to stick with that. It's
your final answer?
Yeah.
That is correct, Jason.
Yeah! First one right. Woo!
The three top scorers on Duke that day: Luke Kennard with 35 points, Emil Jefferson with 20, and Jason Tatum as a freshman, 10 points.
What was the final score of that game?
94-55, Blue Devils.
That may be a similar score.
I looked at the Maine guys. I don't recognize any guys on the Maine roster that even like played high school basketball back then that I recognize. But yeah. Anyway, go Duke.
1 of 2 now. I have the lead.
Right,
how about this? I'll give you a 0-1-1 in the.
That's
in
cool.
The
I think
sheet.
it's fair.
Yeah, because you did get 8 out of 10, and you pulled a couple of good players there. But yeah, I got to start cooking up with some big trivia questions, ones that you won't be able to guess in the middle of the show for the next couple of weeks. But that is going to do it for episode number 7 of the Maine Rundown. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and as always, follow us at the Maine Rundown Pod on X and Instagram. I got it right that time. No Twitter, X on X and Instagram. And as always, stay tuned for some clips, and we will see you all next week.